Moscow, August 19th, 1991, 7 a.m. The summer peace is shattered by the roar of tank engines racing into the city center. They are not assembling for a holiday parade in Red Square. They are there on full military alert. The morning news is bad. Soviet President Gorbachev is seriously ill. The stability of the country is threatened. A committee of senior officials has declared martial law. They say it is to ensure public safety. What the people of Russia aren't being told is that there is a coup underway. Some of the most powerful men in the country want to turn back the clock on history. They want to restore the glories of the Soviet Empire. In 1985, the Soviet Union is a nuclear superpower, a totalitarian state dominated by the Communist Party. Its new supreme leader is Mikhail Gorbachev. He proceeds to stun the world with the introduction of major reforms. He wants to make Soviet society freer and more democratic.
When Mr. Gorbachev first appeared on the scene, there was some suspicion. Was he just trying to reposition the Soviet Union, or was this a real reformer with a real reform program? And it became apparent in the 1980s, at least to us, that this was a genuine reformer and a genuine reform program that could only end with the eventual end of the communist state. So we made the decision, the British government made the decision to support Mr. Gorbachev in the 1980s. And in supporting him, we were essentially supporting the process of reform itself.
Gorbachev introduces glasnost and perestroika into the global vocabulary. Russians revel in their newfound freedoms. Dissidents are released from the prisons, and some, like Nobel laureate physicist Andrei Sakharov, become lawmakers. Gorbachev loosens the Communist Party's hold on government. The Soviet Union will be governed by a president and a democratically elected parliament. Gorbachev becomes the first president of the new political order. Gorbachev is radically changing the Soviet Union. He puts an end to 10 years of war in Afghanistan, Russia's Vietnam. More dramatically, he relinquishes the Soviet Union's iron grip on its satellites in Eastern Europe. In 1989, the Berlin Wall, symbol of communist domination, comes tumbling down. But reform also opens a Pandora's box. The economic system collapses. Hundreds of thousands go hungry, and many are homeless.
Gorbachev admitted that economically they were falling behind the West. And here you have one of the proudest nations in the world suddenly being told by their own leaders that they had fallen, in practice, decades behind the quality of life and living standards in other parts of the world. So psychologically, that was a very hard blow for the Russians to take.
Worse is yet to come. The very existence of the old Soviet Union is in jeopardy. Gorbachev is president of a union of 16 republics, among them the Baltic republics, Ukraine, Georgia, Kazakhstan, and the largest of them all, Russia. The republics don't want Gorbachev's reforms. They want complete independence from Gorbachev and the Soviet Union. Soviet troops are sent to the Baltics and Georgia. But it is too late to keep the runaway republics in the Soviet Union by force. Gorbachev tries a different tactic. He pushes for the formation of a coalition of the 16 republics in a confederation of independent states, of which he would remain head. But he faces a formidable adversary, Boris Yeltsin, the first democratically elected president of Russia. Yeltsin wants confederation, but without Gorbachev and without the Communist Party. The party hardliners don't want Gorbachev's confederation either. They want the old Soviet Union without Yeltsin, and maybe without Gorbachev.
Only 6 republics agreed to sign. Any fool could see what the result would be. It would lead to the dissolution of the country. The Soviet Union would cease to exist. The Baltic republics said no. Moldova said no. Ukraine flatly refused to sign. The Caucasian republics also refused.
Gorbachev sets August 20th as the date to sign the Treaty of Confederation. He then leaves for his summer vacation in Foros in the Crimea. Some members of the old guard are determined to stop the dissolution of the Soviet Union. Chairman of the KGB, Khrushchev. Soviet Prime Minister, Pavlov. Soviet Minister of Defense, Yazov. Soviet Vice President, Yanayev. Deputy Minister of Defense, Berenikov. 2 days before Gorbachev's return, a group of the conspirators meet secretly in the garden pavilion of a KGB safe house.
We discussed the situation and came to the conclusion that the Soviet Communist Party is falling apart. The Soviet economy is falling apart. The country is falling deeper and deeper into debt. People in the country were becoming poorer and poorer. Somebody had to take responsibility, take control. We had to admit, reluctantly, it was the fault of Gorbachev.
Suddenly, in the middle of the meeting, the conspirators are interrupted by a phone call. It is Gorbachev calling from his holiday villa. He is nervous. The American ambassador has warned him of a possible coup. The head of the KGB reassures him. The conspirators decide to send a delegation to Gorbachev.
The mission of our delegation was to convince President Gorbachev that drastic measures had to be taken to stabilize the situation in the country. First of all, martial law had to be declared where the situation demanded.
The delegation arrives at Gorbachev's villa on August 18th. They immediately order all of his lines of communications cut. Gorbachev is in his compound with his family, his secretary, and his personal assistant, Chernayev.
Suddenly, Gorbachev's secretary, Olga, ran into the room shouting, "What's happening?" I said, "What's wrong?" She said, "4 people have arrived. They've gone straight in to see Gorbachev." I wasn't alarmed. Things happen. Maybe it was another Chernobyl. I picked up a phone. I had 4 on the table. Not one worked. They were all cut off. Then I began to have doubts. Something strange was happening. We came in and went straight to the 2nd floor. Everything was quiet. The commander of the guards showed us in, and we sat there waiting. Then I heard Gorbachev asking one of the members of our delegation in a whisper, "Am I under arrest?" We said, "No. We're here on an important mission. We want to talk like friends." And then Varenikov put it straight. He said to Gorbachev, if you don't sign the martial law decree, step aside. Hand over your duties to the vice president or resign. We said goodbye and shook hands. Then, just before leaving, Gorbachev said to me, after the kind of discussions we had, I don't think we will be able to work together.
With Gorbachev under house arrest, Varenikov returns to his Ukrainian headquarters in Kiev. Back in Moscow, the coup leaders declare martial law. The coup leaders have declared martial law, but they neglect to inform or gain the support of top Soviet military leaders.
I was going to leave for vacation that morning. My plane was leaving at 9 a.m., but at dawn I got an order to appear at the Ministry of Defense for a meeting at 6 a.m. There we heard the news.
It is the first in a series of fateful blunders.
On August 19th, I switched on the TV and heard the grim voice of the announcer. He was reading the morning news. Martial law had been declared by a new committee.
With gun barrels aimed at the heart of Russian democracy, the West is very concerned.
I heard about the coup sitting in my office in Downing Street. And I summoned a meeting upstairs with my Foreign Affairs advisor, Percy Craddock, with Stephen Wall, and as far as I can recall, my principal private secretary and others as well. We were not surprised. We had conceived the possibility that there would be such an attempt. Our ambassador had specifically warned us that there could be such an attempt. We did not think it would succeed. We did not think it would succeed. And we gathered together immediately to decide how we should best respond. And the principal determination in our mind in determining what our response would be was, how do we help the reform process and protect the reformers?
I was actually on a bicycle in eastern Holland with my family. And I stopped to get directions, and a Dutchman said to me in Dutch, I suppose he said to me in Dutch, that there's been a coup in Russia and Gorbachev has been taken. And I didn't understand Dutch, but I heard Gorbachev, and so I went rushing along on my bicycle to find somebody who would tell me what really happened, and then had to rush back.
Already, coup leaders have taken the Soviet Union a step backward with the old trick of replacing information with classical music. Swan Lake is played endlessly on radio and TV.
I was at home asleep when the doorbell rang. It was my secretary. He said to me, "Get ready quick. There's been a coup." He heard it from listening to the TV news and to all that Swan Lake stuff on the air.
Russian President Yeltsin is asleep at his summer residence just outside of Moscow. The coup leaders send in their crack KGB SWAT team, Alpha Group, to take care of Yeltsin.
Our men knew we weren't going on an outing. It was a mission, and we knew the objective of the mission: capture Yeltsin on his way to Moscow, or, in an extreme case, liquidate him.
As Alpha surrounds Yeltsin's villa, he knows that there is only one chance for him and the country. He must make it back to Moscow and the White House, the Russian parliament.
My main task was to ensure Yeltsin's safety. It was practically impossible to ensure in the country. We put him into the back seat of the limo. between me and one of my officers. We were wearing bulletproof vests, and we put one on him too. Apparently, at that time, the coup leaders had not made up their minds what to do. After we saw the cars of Yeltsin and his escort leave, we reported back to headquarters and asked for instructions. We were ordered to let the cars proceed to Moscow.
This is the coup leader's biggest mistake. Within hours of the launch of the coup, Yeltsin is opening an extraordinary session of the Russian parliament and rallying resistance to the coup dictatorship.
We tried to contact President Gorbachev, but we could not. They made it impossible. The conspirators have seized all means of communication. Radio, television, telephones are all under their control.
The coup leaders bungle again. They don't control all the means of communication.
We got a possibility to get inside the White House. But, you know, we got in, but we don't really know what to do. I decided to call to all my friends in Washington and New York. And I called to my friends in 60 Minutes in New York, and, you know, it was funny. You couldn't call to a city near Moscow, but it was nothing to do to call to New York, Washington, or Toronto, or whatever.
As the tension heats up, Yeltsin's head of state security, Ivanenko, calls one of the coup leaders.
I called and asked him, Vladimir Alexandrovich, what's happening? He said, oh, we have to restore order. I said, don't you realize people will take to the streets? He said, ironically, for Gorbachev? I said to him, you're taking a gamble sending tanks to the White House. He replied, history will be our judge. And he hung up.
Muscovites take to the streets to fight the coup. Only a few short years before, under the Communist Party's dictatorship, any such action was unthinkable. Now they are gathering around the White House by the tens of thousands, ordinary Russians. They have tasted freedom and are unwilling to let it slip away. Yeltsin seizes the initiative. He will appeal directly to the people of Russia. His head of security, Korzhakov, is constantly at his side.
The appeal was written, and Yeltsin says, I'm going to go out and read this myself. So we go outside, there's all these tanks, and he climbs up on top of one of them. I am fully convinced that our countrymen will not let the coup leaders establish an anarchic and unlawful regime. We appeal to the army and to all patriots not to take part in this reactionary anti-government coup.
The coup leaders respond to Yeltsin with even more armored vehicles and tanks. They are under the command of one of the Soviet Union's most able generals, Lebed. Yeltsin invites Lebed into the White House.
Yeltsin asked me what was my mission. Funny thing was, I didn't know myself. I couldn't answer directly. I replied in a general sort of way, my objective is to protect the White House. From whom? Yes. I'm like a guard on duty, from all who would trespass.
As support for Yeltsin grows, the coup leaders plot to break the back of Russian resistance. 9 hours into the coup. The coup leaders need to silence their main opponent, Yeltsin. They've ordered the army to besiege him in the White House, but the army faces an unexpected challenge. Undeterred by the tanks, the people of Moscow construct barricades in defense of the White House. Anything and everything is commandeered. Bricks, drain pipes, cars, and even streetcars. The coup leaders hold a press conference. Gorbachev's vice president, Yanayev, tries to justify their actions.
I can't agree that this is an anti-government coup. In due time, we'll publish a medical statement on Gorbachev's health.
Isolated in Foros, under house arrest, but in perfectly good health, Gorbachev watches the press conference on TV with his family and personal aide, Chanayev.
Gorbachev told me that he didn't think they would succeed. But he was afraid that if they managed to hold on for 1 or 2 weeks, that people would get used to it.
Gorbachev also decides to appeal to the nation. He makes a secret videotape.
People around the world, you are being misled about what is happening here. In fact, you are being deceived. I declare that any statement about my state of health is a lie. So, in fact, in this way, they have started an anti-constitutional coup based on a lie.
Chanayev removes the tape from the cassette casing to give to Olga Lanina, Gorbachev's secretary.
Chernev put up the volume on the TV and came up to me. He whispered to me, "If you can get out of here, take the tape with you." It is proof that President Gorbachev is alive and in good health.
I told Olga, here, hide it inside your panties. They won't search there.
But the guards forbid her to leave. In Moscow, the work on the barricade continues.
My political counselor and I drove to the Kutuzovsky Bridge and walked across. The bridge was blocked at both ends by tanks and debris. I remember it was drizzling rain. We walked by the tank and we crossed the bridge on foot. And all across the bridge, there was this tremendous air of excitement. There were small groups of people talking animatedly, somberly. And as you got closer to the White House, the masses thickened. People had small fires that they had lit. The debris became thicker. For the most part, people were milling around outside in the thousands. It was a time of intense emotion. And I remember asking people on the bridge that night, how long are you going to stay here? And they said, until Gorbachev is free.
Stalemate. From Kiev, General Varenikov is pushing for action.
I was not only upset, but very angry at all that mess that was going on in Moscow. I sent 5 telegrams from Ukraine, from Kiev, to the other coup leaders, members of the committee, 5 telegrams pushing them hard to take action.
Varenikov flies to Moscow. It is the end of the first day of the coup. That night, the coup leaders make a decision to take the White House by storm. Early next morning, they summon the military's top commanders.
I started to make my report. I said that there were 100,000 people around the White House. Some of the defenders of the parliament had arms. I said if we stormed through the barricades, it would lead to a big bloodbath. Well, they didn't let me finish. General Verenikov stood up and gave me one of his withering looks. "General," he said, "you must fill the others with optimism and calm with the very way you look."
But it is the young defenders who are winning the hearts and minds of the military.
There was this other strange thing that all through the organization of government and the military and the police, there was a great deal of individual decision-making taking place. People who had been affected by democracy, who had seen democracy and decided that it needed to have a life and an experience. They were not going back to the old system, were ready to disobey orders. It was extraordinary bravery on the part of many of them.
Now the destiny of the country lies in the hands of 6 generals. 3 are coup conspirators: General Khrushchev, Marshal Yazov, and General Verenikov. 3 have yet to make up their minds: General Shaposhnikov, General Lebed, and General Grachev. Grachev calls Yeltsin. He warns him of the decision to storm the White House. Outside the White House, volunteer battalions step up their defense preparations. Inside, they are getting ready too. Yeltsin is rushed to a special underground bunker.
Yeltsin had absolutely no hope of leaving the White House. We knew exactly on which floor his office was located. We also knew that in case of an emergency, he would go down to a bunker. And we knew where it was. Later, people who were with him confirmed our information. It was the bunker that we knew about.
But the citizens of Moscow are ready to take on Alpha's crack troops and even give their lives to preserve their newly gained freedom. "6 p.m., day 2 of the coup. The coup leaders will launch an attack against Yeltsin at 2 a.m., but the military is divided."
I asked Grachev, "What would you do if the committee ordered you to take the White House by storm?" He said, "I'll shoot myself, damn it." I said, "Oh, come on, it's too early to shoot yourself. Maybe we can come up with a better solution. I have the Air Force and you have the landing troops. So I'll get my planes in the air flying over Moscow, and we'll give the coup leaders an ultimatum. Look, guys, you better leave quietly because we're not going to wait around for a bloodbath. If you don't recall the order to storm the White House, the bombs will fall on your heads in the Kremlin." And Grachev said to me, "That's a great idea."
In the meanwhile, Alpha Group continues preparations for the assault.
We kept sending out reconnaissance missions. Our men reported back that there was a huge crowd gathering at the White House and that they'd put up barricades fortified with, all sorts of things, streetcars and cars. By that time, the tanks had already surrounded the White House, and we heard that one of the tanks had raised the Russian national flag. We were surprised. We still didn't know where the army stood. We didn't know who they were supporting. So we started working out the details of the operation. The tanks were to break through the barricades to open a corridor for Alpha. The helicopters would begin strafing the White House. What made us hesitate and finally made us to give up the plan was the fact that the American embassy was situated so close to the White House. Our snipers couldn't guarantee the embassy wouldn't suffer.
Now it is a waiting game. No one knows if Yeltsin will survive the night.
And we decided at that moment that I would try and phone Mr. Yeltsin, who was then in the White House. And we got through to Mr. Yeltsin. Somewhat to our surprise, we got through to him. And I had quite a lengthy conversation with him when he said he thought that he probably had 20 minutes to half an hour before the tanks came and forcibly evicted him from the White House and very possibly arrested him. And I supported him over the phone. I then immediately went out into Downing Street to make clear to the world that the British government supported the reform process and opposed the coup under all circumstances. And that was broadcast across Russia within a very few minutes and broadcast to the supportive crowds outside the White House who received it at that time.
6 hours to go. But as the decisive moment approaches, even the KGB's Alpha group has second thoughts.
We asked everybody, all the unit commanders, their personal evaluation of the situation. Practically all of them said they didn't want to obey the order to storm the White House.
The coup leaders are told that Alpha will not obey orders. General Grachev meets with Lebed.
Grachev was very excited, pacing up and down in his office. I said, we've known each other for a long time, fought quite a few battles together. So I say I'm not going to storm into this building, killing thousands of people. Let's put our cards on the table. What are we here? Are we soldiers? Are we executioners? Are we policemen? What are we? He relaxed at once and said he had just made his final decision. It was 8:05 p.m.
In the streets, the situation is becoming increasingly tense as the night wears on. Everyone expects an imminent assault. Then suddenly, all hell breaks loose. Several armored vehicles try to pass through an access tunnel to the square in front of the White House. Mistaking this for the long-awaited attack, the volunteer defenders hurl Molotov cocktails at the armored cars. As they catch fire, the soldiers begin shooting. 3 young people are killed. The deaths break Yasov's nerve. He orders his troops to stop. Then he calls his co-conspirator Khrushchev and tells him that he is out of the game. At 6 a.m. on the 3rd day of the coup, tanks and troops begin to abandon their positions. The coup is unraveling.
Most people thought this is the most bizarre coup It was done in the Soviet manner. It was badly organized. And all through it, whether it was the fact that we had people out on the streets from the beginning, and they would see tanks stopping at red lights. One tank commander stopped my naval attaché who was riding a bicycle around the city and asked him the way to Red Square.
As the coup leaders flee Moscow, they have one last card to play. They commandeer a plane. They want to get to Gorbachev. As the coup leaders fly to Crimea, Yeltsin's vice president Rutskoy is hot on their tail. He is worried about Gorbachev's safety.
They have three options. They'll bring him to Moscow. They'll medicate him to make him mentally unstable. Or three, they'll escape abroad.
Even though the coup leaders are in flight, the armed forces still don't know where their loyalties lie, to the Minister of Defense or Yeltsin and his men.
We asked for a flight path, and the Army Air Traffic Control refused. We took off without permission. They could have shot us down at any time, and they would have been justified.
Meanwhile, the conspirators arrive at Gorbachev's summer villa.
Yeah, I ran out onto the balcony and saw a strange sight in the yard. Our guards, some with machine guns, were shouting, "Halt! Don't move! Stand still!" Now, they told me before they were ready to die in order to defend Gorbachev. Now, there was Gorbachev. He ordered the guards to take the coup leaders into one of the offices and keep them under guard over there.
Gorbachev seems in control, but when Yeltsin's emissary Rutskoy arrives, Gorbachev is less certain of himself.
I went into the president's house. He came out to meet us, looking depressed. He hugged us, saying, "Our liberators." His wife, Raisa, stood next to him. She didn't recognize me, and he told her, "Don't you see who's come here to save us?" I said, "This is strange. How come you're under house arrest, but you still have your personal guards?"
Gorbachev returns to Moscow. Now he knows that power is slipping away from him. A new hero has arisen on the scene. It is his rival, Russian President Boris Yeltsin. Soon Yeltsin will finish what Gorbachev started. The 3 days in August is the turning point that dramatically alters the course of Russian and world history. While the people of Moscow celebrate, the coup leaders are being interrogated.
Is this your telegram? I urge you repeatedly, liquidate Yeltsin's gang. He is a gambler. Yes, I admit it. We agreed that we should ask Mikhail Sergeyevich to leave the presidency for a while so that we could take some measures to restore stability to the country. Afterwards, he would come back and be leader again. We didn't want him to retire. In fact, we never asked him to retire. We just asked him to hand over his duties temporarily to Yanayev, his vice president. I was an old fool to take part in this gamble. I ask you to forgive me. I'm really sorry, and I deeply regret the trauma I caused you. Maybe it was too late, but when I realized that I had exceeded my authority, I withdrew the troops, preventing a bloodier outcome.
Yeltsin has put the bosses of the once all-powerful Communist Party in prison. Now he is after bigger game. He wants to get rid of the Communist Party itself.
You tell me to ban the party as a criminal organization? I can't agree.
But Gorbachev is no longer in command of events.
Allow me to sign this decree suspending the Communist Party of Russia.
Борис Николаевич, Борис Николаевич, Борис Николаевич.
Gorbachev is coming to the end of the road. His one last hope of retaining power is to keep the former republics of the Soviet Union, including Yeltsin's Russia, in a confederation. But once again, he is foiled. Yeltsin has no use or need for Gorbachev. On Christmas Eve, the Soviet Union, the Red Empire, ceases to exist. Not with a bang, but a whimper. Gorbachev announces his retirement.
Because of the present situation, and because of the formation of a community of independent states, I have decided to resign my duties as President of the Soviet Union. My principles guide my decision. The trend to disintegration of the country has prevailed, and I cannot agree to it, nor can I accept it. I leave my office with concern, but I also have hope. I have faith in you, the people of Russia, in your spirit, and in your wisdom.
It is the end of an era of almost 75 years of oppression. The coup leaders adjust to the dismantling of the old order. After almost 2 years in prison, Khrushchev is released and writes his memoirs. On his release, Yazov retires to devote his life to his family. Yanayev emerges from prison and retires. He remains a bitter enemy of Gorbachev. Varenikov declines an amnesty. Alone of the conspirators, he demands a trial, which he finally gets after 2 years in prison. At the trial, he is acquitted. He is elected to the Russian parliament.
The Discovery Times channel brings you the stories that matter. Every night, we examine the issues and events that continue to shape our lives on The World. Next from the Discovery Times channel.